The Mermaid Who Loved Me. Okan was driving leisurely along the third mainland bridge, enjoying the cool night breeze that swept across the Lagos lagoon, when his headlights illuminated something, or rather, someone, standing near the edge of the road. The figure was a woman, her silhouette striking against the shimmering water. As he drew closer, her beauty took his breath away. She seemed almost ethereal, her long, flowing hair catching the faint light of the street lamps. Against his better judgment, he slowed his car and pulled over beside her. "What are you doing out here alone on such a cold night?" Okan asked, his voice laced with curiosity. The woman turned her head slowly, her dark, piercing eyes locking onto his. "I'm just looking around," she replied, her voice as soft and melodic as a lullaby. There was something about her, something mysterious, almost hypnotic, that Okan couldn't ignore. Before he even realized what he was doing, he gestured toward his car. "Get in. It's not safe out here." She hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the car. As she settled into the passenger seat, Okan stole another glance at her. Up close, she was even more stunning than he initially thought. Her features were delicate, her smile faint but captivating. "I'm Okan," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's your name?" "Ebier," she replied, her lips curling into a mysterious smile. As they drove, Okan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unusual about her. She seemed out of place, not just on the bridge, but in the human world altogether. Yet he found himself drawn to her, unable to resist the pull of her presence. What Okan didn't know was that Ebiere was no ordinary woman. She was a mermaid, a being from the shimmering depths of the Atlantic Ocean, beneath the very waters they were driving over. Every year, she was tasked with venturing into the human world to claim a soul for her underwater kingdom. A duty bound by a centuries-old pact her ancestors had forged to sustain the balance of their realm. For centuries, Ebiere had carried out her duty without hesitation. But tonight felt different. As she listened to Okan speak about his life, his dreams, and his love for teaching literature to young minds, something stirred within her, a longing she didn't understand. Yet, her mission loomed over her like a dark cloud. She had until dawn to bring a soul back to the depths. Failing to do so would not only put her at the mercy of the Queen Mother's wrath, but also risk the collapse of her kingdom. This year, her journey brought her to the bustling city of Lagos. Disguised as a stunning young woman with deep, mysterious eyes and an enchanting voice, she blended seamlessly into the vibrant chaos of the city. Her mission was simple: find a soul, take them to her kingdom, and fulfill her obligation. She normally takes her victim on the first night, but there was something about this human that made her hesitate. Days turned into weeks, and Ebiera found herself drawn to Okan. She abandoned her search for another victim, instead spending her days with him, strolling through the streets of Lagos, sharing laughter over bowls of jollof rice, and watching sunsets by the third mainland bridge. Despite her initial intentions, Ebiera fell deeply in love with Okan. He proposed to her one evening under the star-studded Lagos sky, and she accepted, knowing her plan had taken a drastic detour. That night, as Ebiere lay beside Okan, her heart was heavy with an unspoken burden. The room was dimly lit, and Okan had fallen into a peaceful sleep. She turned to watch him, her fingers tracing the outline of his face. He looked so serene, so human, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Suddenly, a chilling whisper echoed through her mind. It was not a voice anyone else could hear, but one she could never ignore. Ebier. The Queen Mother's voice resonated with authority. You are summoned. Now. Her heart sank. She knew this moment would come, but had hoped for more time. Quietly, she slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Okon. Where are you going? Okon's groggy voice startled her. I need to get something urgently, she replied hastily, avoiding his eyes. Before he could question her further, she was out of the room, grabbing a shawl as she headed for the door. Okon sat up, puzzled by her abrupt departure, but eventually shrugged it off, assuming it was something trivial. Outside, the night was still, but Ebier's mind was anything but still. She flagged down a cab, her thoughts racing as she slid into the back seat. Where to, madam? The cab driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. The third mainland bridge, she said curtly. The driver frowned. Where exactly on the bridge? There's nothing there at this time of night. Without a word, Ebiere reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of crisp 100,000 naira notes. She dropped it on the passenger seat in front. Drive, she said firmly. The driver's eyes widened at the sight of the money. Without hesitation, he started the engine. The journey was silent, save for the soft hum of the car engine and the distant sound of waves crashing against the bridge's pillars. As they neared the middle of the bridge, Ebiere spoke. Stop here. The cab driver hesitated, looking around at the dark, desolate expanse. Madam, there are no houses here. Are you sure? Stop the car, she interrupted, her voice low but commanding. When he didn't comply immediately, her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. If you value your life, stop now. Terrified, the driver swerved to the side and parked. His hand shook as he watched Ebiere step out of the car. She walked with purpose to the edge of the bridge, her shawl billowing in the wind. Without a moment's hesitation, she climbed over the rails. The cab driver's jaw dropped. Madam, wait! What are you doing? Ebiere didn't answer. With one final glance at the city lights in the distance, she dived gracefully into the dark waters below. The driver, paralyzed by fear, sat frozen for a moment before slamming his foot on the accelerator and speeding away, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. He didn't stop until he was far from the bridge, muttering prayers under his breath. Beneath the surface, Ebiere felt the familiar pull of the underwater currents guiding her to the Queen Mother's throne. The journey was swift, but with every passing moment, a sense of dread weighed heavily on her chest. When she arrived, the underwater kingdom was alive with activity. The Queen Mother's court was assembled, their expressions grim. The Queen Mother sat on her coral throne, her eyes blazing with fury. You dare keep me waiting? The Queen Mother's voice thundered, shaking the waters around them. Ebiere bowed her head. Forgive me, Your Majesty. Silence. The Queen Mother's gaze was sharp. You have broken our laws. You were sent to the surface to fulfill your duty, and instead, you have allowed yourself to be distracted by human emotions. The murmurs of the court grew louder, the accusation echoing through the hall. Ebiere raised her head, her voice trembling but firm. I did not choose to defy you lightly, but the human I met, he is unlike any I've encountered before. He is kind, selfless, and full of faith. You love him, the Queen Mother interrupted, her tone dripping with disdain. You think love absolves you of your duty? The room fell silent. Ebiere stood her ground, meeting the Queen Mother's fiery gaze. I believe love is stronger than any obligation. I will not bring harm to the man who has shown me what it means to be truly alive. The Queen Mother's laughter was cold and hollow. You speak of love as if it can protect you from my wrath. But you forget, Ebiere. You are bound to this kingdom. and if you do not obey, you will face the consequences." Before Ebiera could respond, the Queen Mother raised her trident, and a powerful current enveloped her, dragging her to her knees. The court watched in silence as the Queen Mother's magic tightened around her, a warning of the price of defiance. But even as the magic threatened to consume her, Ebiera closed her eyes, and her thoughts drifted to Okan. For the first time in centuries, she felt hope, a glimmer of faith that love and light could conquer even the darkest depths. The Queen Mother ordered the Keeper of the Orb to read the allegations to her. The Keeper of the Orb said in a loud voice,
"These are the allegations against you. You have not honored or fulfilled your yearly obligation of bringing a soul to the kingdom. You have spent more than the mandatory time you should spend in the human world. You have agreed to marry a human, which is against our creed. Now, it's your turn to defend yourself against these allegations."
Ebiera replied, "The allegations against me are true. In all these centuries I have never failed in my obligation. I understand the consequences, but what is a life bound by duty if it denies the freedom to love? But now I have seen what it means to truly live, and to be loved in return. Okan's kindness has shown me a world of beauty beyond duty." There was an uproar and anger in the council. The Keeper of the Orb ordered for silence. Ebiera continued, "I want to invoke the clause in our creed." There was a loud silence in the council when she said this, which states that a mermaid can become human continuously for 7 years, but when she returns to the kingdom, she would lose all her privileges and become less than a mermaid. The Queen Mother was heartbroken. Tears streamed down Ebiera's face as she made her choice. "I choose love. I choose Okan, even if it's just for 7 years." The council, after some deliberations, granted Ebiera her wish. Back in Lagos, Okan was worried about Ebiera's sudden disappearance. He had reported to the police about her sudden disappearance. The police were already searching for her. As he stood by the third mainland bridge, staring at the water, he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Ebiera, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're back," he whispered, pulling her into an embrace. "I am," she said, her voice trembling, "and I'm here to stay." Ebiera and Okan got married in a joyous ceremony, surrounded by family and friends. The Queen Mother and other mermaids turned into humans and attended the wedding. For 7 years, their love flourished, and their union brought forth 2 beautiful children, Ife and Adanma. But deep within her heart, Ebiera knew the truth. The 7th year marked the end of their time together. Her duty called, and she would have to return to her kingdom with Okan's soul. As the 7 years drew nearer, she became heartbroken. The thoughts of losing Okan and her children filled her heart with sorrow. In the 6th year of their marriage, something unexpected happened. Okan got born again. He found solace in a small, vibrant church near their home. His faith grew strong, and he began to sense that something was amiss with his beloved wife. Though he loved her deeply, he felt a spiritual wall between them. Okan began to pray fervently for his family, seeking divine protection and revelation. His newfound faith unsettled Ebiera, who had always avoided churches and spiritual gatherings. She realized that his prayers were breaking the hold her underwater kingdom had over her mission. On the eve of their 7th anniversary, Ebiera prepared to reveal the truth to Okan. She wanted to explain her actions, her love for him, and her inability to resist the pull of her kingdom. She prepared dinner. It was Okan's favorite food, jollof rice with turkey, and a chilled bottle of martini. The room was dimly lit, and a candle stood in the middle of the table. But as she sat before him, her tears flowing freely, Okan interrupted her with words that pierced her soul. "I know, Ebiere," he said gently. "I know you're not from here. But I also know that the God I serve is greater than any power in the ocean." Okan had observed that every 2 a.m. his wife would get out of bed and go to the guest room. Okan decided to follow her on one particular night. He observed her changing into a mermaid with a fishtail of multiple colors while she communed in a strange language. Cold chills ran down the spine of Okan. He tiptoed back into their room and had a fever that night. He communicated these strange observations to his pastor, who told him Ebiere is not of this world, so he placed him on some days of fasting. Ebiere broke down, confessing her true identity and the pact she was bound to. Okan held her hands tightly and began to pray, declaring freedom over her life and breaking the chains of the covenant that had enslaved her for centuries. Ebiere also got born again that night. Meanwhile, there was another commotion in the marine kingdom. Ebiere has not honored her own part of the bargain. She had become born again and was now fighting back. She refused to be summoned. The ancient gong was brought, and they inquired why it was impossible to summon Ebiere to appear before them. That was when the truth came out. Ebiere was not a real mermaid. This was how it happened. It was a serene morning by the riverbank when little Ebiere's life changed forever. Her mother, a young widow, had taken her infant daughter to the river to bathe and pray for guidance. Unknown to her, the waters concealed an ancient secret, a hidden kingdom ruled by the enigmatic and powerful Queen Mother of the Seas. As Ebiere's mother prayed with closed eyes, a ripple disturbed the calm river. Out of the shimmering depths rose the Queen Mother, her presence regal and terrifying. Her piercing gaze fell on the infant, and with a flick of her hand, Ebiere was drawn into the waters, leaving her mother screaming in anguish. The mother screamed in horror as she saw her only child disappear in a bubble into the river. She dived into the river, but to no avail. The infant was gone. In the underwater kingdom, Ebiere was transformed into a mermaid. The Queen Mother, desperate to secure her kingdom's future, imbued the child with great powers, proclaiming her the prophesied savior destined to protect their realm. For years, Ebiere grew up believing she belonged to the underwater kingdom. She became a powerful figure among the mermaids, commanding the tides and calming storms. But as she matured, strange dreams began to haunt her. Visions of a crying woman calling her name by the riverbank. These dreams stirred a restlessness within her, an unshakable feeling that something vital was missing. One fateful day, Ebiere confronted the Queen Mother. "Who is the woman in my dreams? Why do I feel drawn to humans?" The Queen Mother's usually calm demeanor faltered for a moment before she composed herself. "Those are illusions, child. Your destiny lies here, with us. Forget the human world. It is nothing but pain and betrayal." But Ebiere couldn't shake the feeling. The ancient gong was consulted, and it said, "Our powers are limited with Ebiere, particularly now that she has become born again and developed a strong will." There was more commotion and anger at the Queen Mother for deceiving the kingdom. The kingdom was in tears. At that moment, something miraculous happened. The waters that had always called to Ebiere receded, and the burden of her duty was lifted. She was free, free to live as a human, to love without fear, and to build a life with the man who had shown her the true meaning of grace and redemption. That afternoon in the office, Okan couldn't shake off an unexplainable pull to head home. He felt a strange sense of urgency, as if something significant was about to happen. Trusting his instincts, he left work early and drove home. When he stepped into the house, the aroma of rich spices greeted him. In the kitchen, Ebiere stood by the stove, humming softly as she stirred a pot of stew. She looked up, surprised. "You're home early," she said with a warm smile. Okan hesitated, a strange unease settling in his chest. "I just felt I needed to be here." Before Ebiere could respond, a sudden gust of wind howled through the house. The room grew cold, and the lights flickered violently. Then, in an instant, everything plunged into darkness. Out of the shadows emerged the Queen Mother, her shimmering form towering and regal, flanked by her entourage of sea spirits. Their eyes glowed with an unearthly light, and the air crackled with power. "Ebiere!" The Queen Mother's voice boomed, echoing through the house. "You have defied our laws. You must return with us to the depths where you belong." Ebiere, trembling but defiant, took a step forward. "I will not go back. I have chosen my life here, with Okan." The Queen Mother's gaze darkened. "You think you can escape your destiny? You underestimate the power of the sea." Okan, though terrified, stepped beside Ebiere and took her hand. "We are not alone," he said firmly. As the Queen Mother raised her trident to summon a storm, Okan and Ebiere fell to their knees, holding hands tightly. They began to pray with fervent voices, calling on the power of God to intervene. "Every force of darkness, we bind you in the name of Jesus," Okan declared, his voice unwavering. Ebiere joined him, speaking in tongues, their combined faith building a shield around them. The Queen Mother laughed coldly, her entourage advancing. The walls of the house began to shake, and water seeped through the floor, swirling around their feet. The sea spirits closed in, their hands crackling with energy. But just as the Queen Mother prepared to strike, a radiant light burst forth from Okan and Ebiere. It was blinding, pure, and filled with an unrelenting power. The Queen Mother's laughter turned to a scream as the light engulfed her and her entourage, forcing them to retreat. With a deafening bang, the house shook violently one last time, and then silence. The oppressive darkness lifted, and the howling wind ceased. Okan and Ebiere opened their eyes to find themselves alone. The house was peaceful once more, the air warm and calm. They looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces. "We've won," Okan whispered, his voice trembling with gratitude. Ebiere nodded, her heart pounding with relief. "It wasn't us," she said softly. "It was God." Together, they knelt again, this time in thanksgiving. They lifted their voices in praise, thanking God for his protection and victory over the forces of darkness. From that day forward, Okan and Ebiere's bond grew stronger, their faith unshakable. The Queen Mother never returned, and the couple lived in peace, their story becoming a testament to the power of love, faith, and unwavering trust in God. Okan and Ebiere renewed their vows in their church, surrounded by loved ones. Together, they dedicated their lives to helping others, sharing their extraordinary story of love, redemption, and the power of faith. The mermaid who had come to Lagos to claim a soul found her own soul instead, transformed by love and the unwavering power of a praying husband.